pictured 5 Oklahoma City cops who face first-degree manslaughter charges for shooting dead 15-year-old gas station robber in a hail of 13 bullets after he had thrown down his weapon and surrendered. Stavian Rodriguez was shot 13 times by officers responding to reports of an attempted armed robbery at a convenience store on November 23rd of last year. The officers who have been charged after filing lethal rounds are Bethany Sears, Jared Barton, Corey Adams, John Skuta and Brad Pemberton. Rodriguez appears to be cooperating when he was first shot. Footage shows a 6th officer was the first to fire a less lethal weapon, but will not be charged. We have video. We'll show it up until the point where we can show it. You can judge for yourself in terms of cooperation. Again, these are split-second things, so we'll try to slow that down. I've watched the video. We'll let you see it first a couple times, and then we'll talk about it. But let's read a little bit more about the story first before we get into that video. It says here, if convicted, they could face life in prison. Here is Officer Sears, and these are the other officers here, Barton, Adams, Skuta, and Pemberton. They all look pretty young, don't they? Except one. I mean, these officers all look pretty young. Except for perhaps this gentleman here, but all of these guys, they look like kids, right? God, I'm so old. I think I'm older than all of these people here. Here's the gentleman here, Stavian Rodriguez, 15. He also looks pretty mature. Not that that has anything to do with anything, but he looks older than 15. Show us your hands, sir. Nobody has to get hurt, cops tell Rodriguez over a speaker. Rodriguez is seen climbing out of the drive-thru window with his hands raised. As cops scream, hands. The boy then slowly moves his hand to his waistband and lifts his shirt to show cops that he is removing the weapon tucked into his jeans. That part went okay. You'll see in the video, you'll see him reaching, and I thought the shots were going to come right then, but you see him lifting his shirt. He takes the gun out, puts it down. You'll see. Get face down on the ground. Cops order as Rodriguez removes the weapon and drops it to the floor. Oh, don't do that, a male officer says to the kid, as a female cop orders him to get on the ground and drop it. Rodriguez then reaches in his pocket in what appears to be an attempt to remove something else. That's the problem. Let's check out the video. As the cops scream and multiple gunfire shots are heard. Like I said, I'll have to cut it off at some point. Can't show you all of that. They don't show the body hitting the floor or anything for you individuals watching on BitChute. I know you guys might be hoping for that kind of stuff. Here's a photograph here to give you an idea leading up. This is after he comes out. The drive-thru window is here. You'll see in the video he comes out of the window here. Ends up right about here. Hands up. He had reached in his waist already. Pulled the gun out. Drops it to the ground. You think that that's it. And this is the still shot here. All right, let's get on with the video.
Yep. Hands! Oh, don't do that. Get down! Get down! Drop it! Get your no! Yep. Hands!
I got nothing on it. It's sad for sure. What I said in the comments below was so close. He did the first thing right. He did the first part right. Put the gun down. Maybe that's not even the right thing to do. That's pretty dangerous in and of itself. I'd be frozen. Right? Don't do anything. They can, hey, there's something in my waistband. You come and take it out. I'm not moving a muscle. But that's coming from somebody who's 43 and has seen these stories many times. Kids, you think back to the situation, not exactly the same. Tamir Rice, 12-year-old. We're talking about the age. Obviously, 3 years is pretty drastic in terms of your development. A kid in that situation, and he wasn't doing anything wrong, so don't think I'm conflating the two. This guy here is robbing what looks to be some kind of convenience store. What I'm getting at is the ignorance, and that's ignorance that comes with age, just not knowing how things work. And fuck, man, that's what I said in my comment below, is the first part went well enough. Why did he reach around? We'll find out perhaps that there was nothing there. And I would be willing to bet there wasn't, but why? Right? It's never having been in that situation. Panic, as I said, just ignorance to things. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he just had his ID there and had a brain fart as a kid. Tamir Rice, like I talked about, he thought he was out there playing fun and games with his fake gun. Terrible situation. That's all I can say. I don't know that you look at life in prison, and you certainly feel for the family. How's this going to go? I don't know. Eventually, a commanding officer orders the cops to cease fire. Another video taken by KOCO's news crew, which was at the scene when the shooting happened, shows another view of the shooting. He had dropped his effing gun. He had dropped his effing gun, a woman's voice is heard screaming. Master Sergeant Gary Knight told the outlet immediately after the incident that he came out with the gun in his hand. He did not follow officers' instructions while he came out with the gun in his hand. Ultimately, he was shot. That's not true, according to what we saw there. Totally not true. The gun was in his waistband. I should say maybe right before he was coming through the window. Maybe he had the gun and we didn't see it. But from the footage we saw there, he didn't have the gun. Period. The hand was not on the gun, holding it out like the guy makes it sound. He came out with the gun in his hand. No, he didn't, homie. Now, that doesn't necessarily change things in terms of how I feel about it or how a jury's going to feel, but it just shows you here how people can see things differently. Someone here is saying he came out with the gun in his hand. This other woman saying he had dropped the gun, but was she at the angle where she saw him go into his pocket? Different perspectives, right? Oklahoma District Attorney David Prater has charged 5 other responding officers with first-degree manslaughter. After being shot with the less lethal round, 5 officers unnecessarily fired lethal rounds at Rodriguez, striking him numerous times and inflicting mortal wounds. Prater's investigator Willard Page wrote in an affidavit. And this is the same kind of thing that they talk about with Chauvin. Different situation entirely, but in terms of a defense is, were these officers operating within the guidelines of their training by the Oklahoma City Police Department? And if so, how did that one officer know to use the less than lethal force while these other individuals, perhaps the first gunshot is heard and then they all join in not knowing what the threat is? How do you look at training? Right? Training, as they always say. An autopsy determined Rodriguez suffered 13 gunshot wounds. Page wrote, officials have not yet revealed which officer fired the fatal shot. It was also not immediately clear whether any of the officers had attorneys who could speak on their behalf, but John George, president of the Oklahoma City Fraternal Order of Police, defended their actions. Officers must make life and death decisions in a split second, relying on their training. When an armed robbery suspect did not obey police commands, 5 officers perceived the same threat and simultaneously fired their weapons, he said. And people always talk about the 13 shots fired and, oh, it was excessive. They were talking about that in the Rayshard Brooks case, I believe. It was excessive. How many's too many? I don't play that game. Look, if a threat is there, you keep firing until the threat is laid down. And I'm not saying that that's the case in the Brooks case here. That's for a jury to decide. I'm not one of those people that's going to sit here and say, oh, well, that's too many. Instead of firing 13, the appropriate number would have been 7.73 shots with divided by the square root of pi times 5. I don't play that game. If I'm on the other side of the gun, it's until the threat is laid down. But again, it's about training, in my opinion. People recognizing a dangerous situation versus not. Like, I would be more thinking along the lines of, how did that one officer not perceive the threat, or perceive the threat in such a manner that non-lethal force was necessary, whereas these other 5 went the lethal route. A loss of life is always a tragedy, and we know these officers did not take firing their weapons lightly. The OKC FOP stands by these officers and maintains they acted within the law. There's this other video here. I want to raise something, and again, not being in law enforcement, I can't speak to this, but just a little something, a little perspective and a thought after that. Read one paragraph, then we'll kind of wrap it up. But check this out. Now watch this. A lot of officers involved, right?
Show me your hands now! Show us your hands, sir. Nobody has to get hurt. Show us your hands. He's got it. He's got his hands out.
Got his hands out.
Show us your hands. On the ground. One person. Get on the ground. Face down on the ground.
And there goes Bethany.
Get the fuck on the ground.
So just watching that video, my thought is it perhaps a situation where you had too many officers on the scene? Look, I get it. It's a crime, armed robbery. A lot of officers would have responded, but is it a situation where there were too many there, just in this sense, too many there to control it in a way, that chain reaction? One officer fires, they all start firing. Is there something within the protocols that can be looked at, training? And again, this is just something totally off the wall. Not in law enforcement, so I have no idea. Were there too many people there to control the situation? Did more officers contribute to the situation getting out of hand? If it were one or two, a partner team that knows each other really well, could they have handled this situation better? Now, that doesn't mean anything in terms of the jury. The facts are going to come out. The jury's going to evaluate the evidence. I'm just thinking about training-wise. So is there a possibility that there were too many officers here? We're talking about learning from experiences and kind of revamping trainings. Now, had there been a situation where there was like 4 or 5 armed robbers, then yeah, you need the whole squad there. But we're talking about one person. Would a 2-person team be enough? 3, 4 officers? Who knows? What's the number? Or is it something where maybe the lead officer in charge could have done a better job at taking control and being the one to communicate, because you hear them all yelling, right? So could it have been a situation where one officer was more forceful in saying, hey, I'm the one here in charge, listen to me, put the fucking gun on the ground, right? Everybody else, relax, I got this. The officers have been on administrative leave since the shooting. Police also released the officer's body camera footage after the boy's mother sued for it last month. Another boy, 17-year-old Wyatt Cheatham, has also been charged with first-degree murder for Rodriguez's death, felony murder, after he admitted to being involved in the robbery, but was there when cops killed Rodriguez, KOCO reported. A suspect can be slapped with felony murder charges in Oklahoma if somebody dies while certain felonies are being committed, so felony murder. Cheatham is still being held without bond in the Oklahoma County Jail, where his supporters have rallied multiple times claiming he should be charged with robbery, not murder, according to KOCO, and we'll see how that hashes out. He needs to be charged appropriately, charged with the robbery of the store, not murder, supporter Yolanda Meekin said. That's the reason the police should be defunded. In a video I saw yesterday, he carefully dropped his weapon for the police to see, and his body language indicated a desire to cooperate and peacefully surrender. The police must have panicked. Now you see how I can see it differently than this person? Somebody could see it one way. He carefully dropped his weapon. I see it a different way. I see, yeah, that sucked. He dropped his weapon. He was so close. But why did he reach around? Now, I'm not indicating how I would feel if I were on a jury. I'd wait to see more evidence. This person doesn't even acknowledge the fact that he went behind his back after that. There's no acknowledgement made of the entire situation. So that's the kind of individual that I think you don't want on a jury. You have to be able to consider the whole chain of events. If you go around harming people and businesses, chances are you might end up in a bad situation. 25 officers to one guy, they had good cover, and he was surrendering. It wasn't like a one-on-one battle, very bad police work. I believe they all will be found guilty. Awful incident, but CCTV seems to indicate that he wasn't following orders, even after removing the firearm from his waistband. So there you have it. Again, it's contrasting, right? How horrible? I agree. We'll leave it at that. See what happens with this going forward. One final thing I want to hit on, aside from comment nonsense aside, and just a quick thought in passing, probably should delve more into this, but when you have these situations, I try to think about it from this perspective. How is it that these kids, and any kids that end up in this situation to begin with? What is it here? What is it in home life? What is it in society that leads individuals like this, 15-year-old, and he was with a 17-year-old, to think that this is the way to behave in life? Is there something that we should be doing better in our society to make sure that individuals don't think that this is the way to behave, or they're not so hard up for money or danger or whatever it may be, to where they turn to something like this and they end up getting what they get? We'd like to avoid these kind of situations from beginning. How do we do that? I could sit here and postulate for an hour or two just trying to figure it out. So perhaps we'll look at that in later videos. But thanks for watching, everybody. Take care and be well.